Good evening and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. We are coming to you from the Athena Hotel in Bugolobi, and tonight on the show we'll be speaking about violence against women and children and using the law to combat it. In this case, we are looking at intimate partner violence, and this is in reference to women. And when we come to children, we'll be looking at sexual violence against children. Well, to start the show and to also set the stage for what we will be talking about tonight, there's a survey that was done by UNICEF in collaboration with the Ministry of Gender. It was done on violence against children. And I'll just quickly read some of the statistics for you. The survey was done in 2018, so it's very recent. There are three types of violence: sexual, physical, and emotional. 3 in 4 children in Uganda will experience one of these types of violence during childhood. Of 18 to 24-year-old Ugandans, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys reported experiencing sexual violence during their childhoods. This included 11% of girls experiencing pressured or forced sex. Only about half of victims of sexual violence tell someone else. Fewer than 1 in 10 children ever received post-violence services. They're embarrassed and afraid of getting in trouble. 4 in 10 girls and 6 in 10 boys ages 13 to 17 experienced physical violence in the last year. Violence causes missing school and children being twice as likely to self-harm. Half of 18 to 24-year-olds believe it is acceptable for a man to beat his wife, and more women than men. 1 in 3 18 to 24-year-old Ugandans reported suffering emotional violence during their childhoods. Well, let's say it as it is. Once again, thank you for joining us. Like I said earlier, we're coming to you from the Athena Hotel in Bugolobi, and my guest for tonight, right next to me, is Esther Kasamba, who works with the International Justice Mission as the Senior Communications Coordinator, and she's also a lawyer, hence the All right, and next to Esther is Alice Muhire, who is a manager, Casework Partnerships, and she's also a lawyer by profession. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So I've been looking at these statistics, and 3 in 4 children, that's really, really scary.
Yeah.
What do we mean by 3 in 4 children? That means there are more children getting...
Of every 4 children that you're seeing, 3 in 4 of them have been victims of some form of violence.
And we said that could be physical, emotional,
or sexual violence, yes.
Can you paint a picture for us on when we talk about sexual violence against children? What does that mean? Do you have any examples you could share with us?
Yes, many, very many examples. So maybe one that comes to mind, one of the most heartbreaking stories that I've had, or cases that we're dealing with at IJM right now, is a case of a young boy who ran away from home sometime because his mom had gotten married to someone else and didn't want him at home. And so whilst he was away trying to pick scrap, making money, a lady came to him and asked him to go to this school. He goes to the school, wasn't paying school fees, joins the school, and then the headmaster of the school starts to molest the boy. And every night he'd come to his bed and would molest him. And this boy was only 9 years old.
This was a boarding school?
It was a boarding school. The boy was only 9. And turns out this headmaster was not just molesting this boy. He was doing this to over 6 other children in that school, giving them 500 shillings, 5,000 shillings, and molesting them. So.
And the boys, of course, are not going to report this. And when you look at the figures that UNICEF, from the UNICEF report, the figures are quite high for boys. And I suspect boys, like you say, they don't report these things. So the figures must be higher.
Yeah. So definitely boys are less likely to report than girls, just because of the stigma and embarrassment. How does a young boy who's supposed to grow up to be a man go and report such a case? So the statistics that you have are probably of the very few reported cases. There are very many silent male victims out there who have been victims of violence, for sure.
Okay.
And in addition to what Esther is saying, even with the few that report, and that report showed that about 1 in 10 of the children actually reported actually got services. And that was the age bracket of about 17 to 24 years of age. And then when you look at the bracket that is below that, 1 in 20 reported, but none of them got services. Very few got services.
So the point of that is, so why am I reporting anyway? I'll just get into trouble.
Yes. And so in sexual violence against children, we are dealing not only with shame, but with norm. Abuse becoming a norm because of the lack of response.
Okay.
Yeah, and in addition to sexual violence against children, we also come across cases of intimate partner violence.
Tell me about those.
So yeah, first of all, intimate partner violence, I'd like to explain what intimate partner violence is. It is the abuse that is occasioned on partners who are in a domestic man-woman relationship. And we have, as an organization, started focusing on that too. And as we intervened in this space, we came across one of the cases that has left us dumbfolded. This is a case of a lady. She's about 40-something years of age. She has 4 children. She is cohabiting with this gentleman. So one fateful evening...
He's the father of the children?
He's the father of some of the children. So one evening he comes home reeking of alcohol, very terribly drunk, and he was demanding for conjugal rights. And I'm using conjugal rights to be very polite. Yeah, he was demanding for conjugal rights. And because of his state, she turned him down. And so he then suspected that she was, getting her satisfaction elsewhere. And he demanded to check her genitals and see whether what he was alleging was what he thought was actually happening. And of course there was a scuffle there, and he drags her out of the house, takes her out in the open, gets some grass, sets it on fire, and inserts it in her genitalia. And yeah, there we go, that's intimate partner violence. So in collaboration with justice, law and order sector officials, institutes like police and prosecution, we responded to this lady's case, and the perpetrator was arrested, prosecuted, and now we see her happy because there is a 6-year sentence that has been slapped on this man.
A 6-year sentence doesn't
cut it.
Quite cut it, but I'm also very curious about her emotional state, her physical state after this. Does she get medical treatment? Does she get, what happens?
Yes, and so this is where I would now like to talk about International Justice Mission and how we work, so that we can understand that state. So as an organization, International Justice Mission, or rather IJM, is a global non-governmental organization whose mission is to protect the poor from violence. Now, the domain of protecting the poor from violence is the mandate of government. But we work in partnership with the government to do 4 core things. One is to rescue victims of abuse from that abusive situation. Then we work with the government institutions to make sure that these perpetrators of the abuse are restrained and held accountable, meaning that they will go through a criminal trial process. And then we also ensure that, work with the government to ensure that the survivors of the abuse are restored to safety and strength, that they are rehabilitated. And then as we are doing that, we also work in collaboration to identify what are those gaps that are exposing women and children to this kind of violence.
Before we come to the gaps, I'm curious to know, when you spoke about one of the mandates is to rescue people like that. So you rescue this 9-year-old boy from the school. You rescue this woman whose husband did things I can't even begin to imagine. what does rescue mean? Do you come and take her from the home, and at what point do you rescue them?
Yeah, so it really depends. So rescue, it's going to be by case basis. So if it's a child in a home where it's the mom or dad who are violating this child, then yes, it's picking them out of that situation, connecting them to an existing shelter, making sure that the police is informed of this crime, trying to make sure that the police is working with the probation officer. So it's just all these multidisciplinary different sectors trying to collaborate that and make sure they come together to make sure that this victim, this boy or this woman who's been a victim of intimate partner violence gets help.
I'm curious about the kinds of shelters that we take them to, because sometimes you take someone to a shelter and it's a worse place than where they were before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, as an organization, we closely work with each of the government institutions that is mandated to deliver a particular service to the citizens. So shelters are controlled by the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. And so we work very closely with the probation officers. What we do is actually engage the police, to engage the probation officers, to identify a shelter, because for each shelter to operate, it should have had authorization from the Ministry of Gender. So we connect the police to the probation officer. The probation officer identifies a shelter which they have visited, because before it's approved, the probation office has visited, the probation officer will have visited this shelter and make sure that it qualifies. Now, we do not just leave it there. When the child has actually been taken to this shelter or the woman is connected to a shelter, we also make sure that we do follow-ups. Because one of our mandates is not only to support government, but to also support civil society organizations that are in this space. We have built expertise in responding in a multidisciplinary way to abuses of a sexual nature, abuses involving things like slavery, to mention a few. And so we will come in and identify, okay, how is this child doing? How is the shelter delivering its services? And intentionally build a relationship that will allow us to also identify areas where the shelter might need strengthening. So for example, we have worked with shelters that were receiving children that had been abused, but all the interventions that they were doing were stopping at providing livelihoods and psychosocial support. But for the complete recovery of this victim, of this survivor, they have got to be empowered in a legal perspective also to be able to face that abuse if it happens again, and to also qualify. So we will come in and train the shelter on how do you engage the justice system. Really what we want to do is to see that the justice system is engaged to respond.
So while you're focusing on the justice system, I like that you also think about the life after for this individual. So this 9-year-old boy is also trained on if this ever happens again, this is what you must do. You must speak out, or are you now going to be a peer influencer wherever you go? What happens with them?
Yeah, definitely. The goal is to empower them, to make them survivors of a violence and not for them to remain as victims. So the shelters, because we don't want to do all the work everywhere, we can't take ourselves. That's why we work through partners. So the shelters and our partners who own shelters will look to empower the boys and make sure they become strong, confident men or strong, confident women, so that if if the violence was to reoccur, they would be able to say no, so that they speak out, so that they can just be that strength that other people who are going through the same situation can look at and be like, oh, if he got out of it and if he's being this strong boy, then surely I should also say something, report to the police.
Or if he managed to report it and something was done.
Something was done, then surely. And also, not just that, it's also when people see these perpetrators actually being held to account, it acts as a deterrent to other people who might be thinking, okay, let's just go and molest again, or let's beat our wives.
Yeah, but if you're giving people 6 years.
Well, 6 years is something, Joseph. Like, would you rather have 6 years or have 0 or have nothing done? It's a start. Yeah. It's a start. I mean, for this intimate partner violence case, the North, that's the biggest place where cases of violence are found in the North. But if the court, in 5 months, it was 5 months of prosecution, 5 months of prosecution.
5 months is a miracle.
It is a miracle, you know, Uganda. So in 5 months of prosecution, if the court can sentence this guy to 6 years of jail time for a crime against a partner, I think that's a breakthrough case for the people in the North.
Yeah. And what we actually observe and notice along the way as we engage the justice system stakeholders and as we accompany victims, survivors through the system is that there are incremental steps of milestones. So you will be alarmed at the fact that the cases that we handled before this case study that I shared with you, the perpetrators were sent away with just a caution.
Like, don't do it again.
Do not do it again. It's bad, yeah.
And a pat on the
go
back.
And sweep the court
or they
compound.
tell the woman, what did you do to make him react this way?
Exactly. So those are the responses that you get. So many, the reason why many of the abuses, both involving children and women, do not even come to the surface, is that they are sent away because people think this is a family matter, this is normal, I mean, you can deal with it.
And there is more to it than we know, so,
exactly.
you know.
Yeah, so those are some of the reasons that then end up trickling in very minimal sentences. But one of the things that we have learned, and which is what we do as an organization, is that we endeavor to work in collaboration with the justice system, because we know that it's only then that there will be a breakthrough that will not only help this individual, but so many individuals. And so, and that's what I talked about before, that we continuously engage the system, collectively identify what are the gaps that need strengthening.
Okay.
So for example, you could be surprised that maybe a police officer in the outpost thinks that, I mean, men are supposed to beat women. Actually, statistics show that there's a survey that was done in a place I forget, but it showed that 90% of the women in that area thought it was okay to be beaten.
I'm going to ask us to take a break here. Not that I think that it's okay to be beaten, but also because our time is fast spent, and we'll start from there when we return. Let's take a short break. From the Athena Hotel in Bugolobi, and I stopped you at a very delicate statement. 90% of the women in that area think it's okay for a woman to be beaten.
Yes, and more still, the men, 70% of the men thought, yeah, sometimes the woman has to be beaten. And so when you are dealing with people that have been victimized and they think it is okay, it is very challenging to engage the system to protect them, because at one point they will withdraw. We have had cases where you start the journey with this lady. We had another case where this lady was beaten. So the husband beat the child, and so she comes in to protect the child, and the husband beats her, and another child joins, and like he beats the four of them thoroughly, injuring them, and she was with child.
The five of them now?
Yeah, the 5 of them now. So we intervened in this case, we rushed it. Actually, it was a partner that brought us in and said, guys, please come, there's this case that's going on. So because because we have over the time built relations with the justice system stakeholders, they called us in, so we worked with the police and then got the man arrested, and then the police got the man arrested, and then they processed his file to court. The case died before the first hearing because the lady said, you know what, I am weak, I need this man to come and help me. And interestingly also, before that, the man had gone and sold the only cow that the family was using for sustenance. So he chopped off their economic sustenance. They could not survive. They had to be dependent on him. So in order for the children, and it was time for the children to go back to school. So in order for the children to go back to school, she was heavily pregnant, she needed support. The house where she was staying had been given to them on behalf of the man. So the fact that she was too economically dependent on this man, she decided, okay, let me withdraw this case. And in some instances where you find that, which is why we tackle cases of violence against women and violence against children. We want to break the cycle of victimization. At times you find that because this man was also exposed to violence as a child, seeing his mother being beaten, he thinks it's okay, it's an entitlement for him to do this.
And the children are watching.
The children are watching. The girl sees her father, this lady, some of her children demanded, we want daddy back. So what are the odds that when these girls are in their marriages, that they will go and report that my husband has beaten me? So it is an appalling situation which needs to be addressed, and we are grateful that the Justice Law and Order Sector gave us an open window to come and working with them. We have a memorandum. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Justice Law and Order Sector to combat violence against women and children.
Yeah. Josephine, I want to go back to some statistics that Alice mentioned about more women believing it's okay for the man to beat his wife than men. For me, that's one of the most alarming things ever. It just shows that we need to have a cultural change and a mindset change, just as a country as a whole, just women to be able to say, no, this is wrong, right? This is, before it's even a crime, it's wrong.
Is this one of the things that you're doing? I know that you have a national program.
Mm-hmm.
Is awareness, or whichever we phrase it, one of the things that's part of that program?
So we like I said earlier, we really work in partnership with both government and NGOs.
Mm.
Our expertise is mostly with the response.
So it's already happened?
While engaging, when it has
Okay.
happened, what do you do next? However, we have good partners who actually deliver prevention mechanisms, strategies, such as behavior change campaigns. And so as we enter into an area and start to identify what are some of the things that are fueling the abuse against women and children, we then identify partners and then come up with a strategy of this is what we notice, and then they deliver. They include that in their strategy.
So I've always wondered about lawyers, and you're both lawyers. Well, you might be representing the victim, and you're doing your very best to get them the support they need, also to get this person behind bars. There's another lawyer out there who is representing the guy or whoever it is that did the thing that they did. Do lawyers have an ethical obligation maybe to investigate the things, or is it their job that somebody comes and tells you the thing and your job is to protect that person with everything that you have?
Yeah. Well, yes, lawyers do have an ethical obligation because we are high above everything else officials of court, and so we should make sure what we present in court is the truth and nothing but the truth. but of course,
I see you say that
no
you're
one
smiling
is.
because
Yeah, because like, no one is held. No one holds themselves. Okay, some people do hold themselves to that standard, but most lawyers probably do not. Of course, I haven't done any research or anything, so I can't speak with 100% confidence on that. But the difference between what IJM does and what possibly most lawyers in law firms do is that what our work is geared towards is having us changing the system or collaborating with the government. So because our work is so vital to victims and people who have suffered these violences and who are vulnerable to the violences, we try to make sure that the cases we take on are credible, that they're truthful, and that these clients are not lying to us. So we are a team of investigators and psychosocial workers and lawyers, and so every time a case comes to us, the investigators is going to go and check if this case is actually, this person is telling us the truth. Okay, does it have some grain? Yeah, before we take it on or before we inform our partners and work with our partners. Yes.
And in addition to what Esther is saying, everyone has a right to be defended, whether you are actually a perpetrator or you were a friend. And so as a lawyer, when you have learned that your client is actually a perpetrator, you are mandated to help them through the process, to go through the system well. So for example, when we talk about capital offenses, the trial will not start unless there is a representation, a legal representation for that perpetrator. And that's why we hear of things like state briefs, and those are lawyers hired by the state to represent the accused people. Yeah, because it's not only about proving the facts, it's also about understanding what were the circumstances, because that goes to the sentence.
So what were the circumstances? Did you coming to set grass on fire, drag me out of your house?
And so that is the thing. And so
the lawyer, a mental issue.
So like that. Well, maybe a mental issue, but also maybe helping the perpetrator understand that really what you did was wrong. It is criminal. Do not repeat it. So because of that, the state is taking you to a correctional facility to help you deal with your anger issues, so that next time you know how to, to go about the issue.
I'm struggling. What do the victims usually normally report to when the few times that they do?
Yeah.
Who is the go-to person? Is it the police? Who is it?
Yeah, and so it depends. If we're speaking about the children, normally the girls will report to a family member or a friend, and the boys are more likely to report to a neighbor or a friend, less likely to report to a family member. So yes, it definitely depends on the group, but very few of the children who are abused actually know where to go for actual help. Like, should we go to the police? Very few of them. I mean, when we were 13, what did we know about going to the police, reporting your case, having it put in the criminal register book? You know, like, you hardly knew that. So very few children out there know where to go, where the services are, who to go to.
I know the ministry has a toll-free line, 116 for children.
Sauti.
So it's called Sauti?
Yes.
So when you're abused or anything, or online abuse, physical abuse, or even the threat of it, you call 116?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and ideally, actually, Sauti, the Uganda Child Helpline, is one of the organizations that we are working towards a partnership.
Okay.
And so what happens is that they, and I'm sorry, I'm not their representative, but I'd like to say what I know they do, is when they receive a report, they then identify people in the justice law and order sector who will take on the case.
Okay.
And when we talk about justice law and order sector, we are not only talking about police, judiciary and prosecution. Ministry of Gender is part of that. But that entity. But also we talk about health, because sometimes the children, if the child has been defiled, then the first thing you want to do is to go and look for a medication that will ensure that this child is not exposed to a virus. Then you have to deal with things like pregnancy, then the treatment. So usually
and the psychology.
Yes. So usually it's like the health facility that you go towards an emergency critical crisis place. Yeah.
Well, I've always wanted to try this number and see if it actually works. So I'm going to take a few seconds to see if it works. And just be sure.
That is fake, because I've done
it.
it.
Welcome to the child helpline.
Oh, look at that.
Okay, now that
you
just so I could say, I wanted to be sure that it actually works before we continuously tell people that there's a number that for them to call. So let me take another short break and we'll be right back. We're coming to you from the Athena Hotel in Bugolobi, and we're speaking about sexual violence and intimate partner violence. So I wanted to ask, does prosecution work? Communities are taught, teachers, we're all from communities, about forgiveness. So while I understand that church and all of these other things, there's a reason for the forgiveness, peace and harmony. But really, shouldn't there be a price to pay? And I don't mean cash.
So prosecution does work. IGM has proof that prosecution does work because, as Alice mentioned earlier, we had a project in Mukono that was a land grabbing project, but at the end of the project we did an end-line survey and found that because of the work that we were doing in Mukono, actually there was a reduction in the prevalence of land grabbing, a 50% plus 54% reduction in land grabbing in Mukono. So that shows that though the direct impact of prosecution is that victims see justice and that criminals are placed in jail, it does, another outcome of it is that it stops these crimes from actually happening and dissuades other people who might be thinking, oh, let me do this, from doing it. So prosecution works, and people out there who are victims of these crimes should go and report them to the police, just if for nothing else to stop such crimes from happening and becoming more rampant.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And in addition to what Esther is saying, forgiveness is good. For everyone to live past something that hurt them, letting go is a very good thing. However, forgiveness is different from accountability. Whenever there is an action that has consequences, even if you forgive, the consequences don't go away. Similarly, accountability doesn't just go away. And it's very critical for accountability to happen, which is why criminal justice systems exist. Once there is no accountability for wrong behavior, for criminal behavior, it then starts to set the stage for impunity and high prevalence. And that is why we see some of these abuses heightening, because the response seems to be lower than what is the crime that is happening back in the communities. And so, yes, even as we encourage people to forgive, because it's really critical for part of their healing, part of their restoration, we also encourage them to engage in the justice system and get accountability for the abuse that happened to them. We haven't seen a reoccurrence of any abuse after the person has been convicted. There has been no reoccurrence, which means there's a lesson learned.
Sometimes, and I'll give you examples of some of the cases we've been having in the media in recent times, of the person who was caught for having maybe killed this person was just out of jail a few months or so before. So I guess my question is, what happens after this person comes out of jail? Who watches them? Who ensures that they're on track? Or just that, okay, maybe let's start with, are they allowed back in communities? Who ensures that they're allowed back in the communities? Because then what seems to happen is they can't go back to where they were because people are watching them. So they'll find another place to hide, and then again continue with the bad habits that they went to jail with.
Yeah. And unfortunately for Uganda, we do not yet have a system where we have they call them
track sex offenders or track people who've been perpetrated some of these offences.
Yeah, and we do not have particular officers. They call them parole officers.
Yeah,
parole officers that continue to monitor your behaviour up to a certain point. We don't have that yet.
Isn't that really important though?
It is an important factor.
Because I don't know about the statistics, but I know that repeat offenders, someone will be more likely to do the thing again than someone new doing the thing.
Yes,
that's
that
true.
is true. Yeah,
that is true, and well, it all stems from the lack of a database to monitor people who have been registered to have committed an offense. So when you have those, then you have a tracking mechanism. Then you're able to track with the prisons and say, is this person a repeat offender, yes or no? What we have in the law is a provision that heightens the sentence if someone is a repeat offender, but we don't have the basis for that information to know whether this person is a repeat offender. Without
it's the purpose.
Yeah, it does. There is definitely a loophole. There's something that needs to be done in that field, and yes, the baby step. We'll get. Hopefully, the government will get
steps.
there. Yeah,
we're about to close, but I need to hear a bit from you about emotional violence. When we speak about that, what exactly are we saying?
Yeah.
And how do you handle emotional violence? Because this is not one of the things you can go to court and say it was, emotional violence, and they'll believe you.
Yeah.
You don't have proof for that.
Yeah. It's hard to prove emotional violence when you are still trying to get physical and sexual violence also recognized. I think you know that rape is not a criminal offense. Marital rape is not a criminal offense in Uganda. We don't have a provision.
I like that you're even whispering as you say this particular.
Yes, because and it's difficult to prove because this is an abuse that happens when it's just two people, and what are the signs? But what we want to do, or what we are doing, is beginning with the more obvious abuses. Because our role, as an organization, our objective is to ensure that this machinery for the justice system is well oiled and it's running. So
for now, we don't even have a conversation about emotional violence.
Well, we can have that conversation, Josephine.
But what are you saying in that conversation?
So it's a tricky thing. It's very hard to prove. I don't think it's just only in Uganda. I mean, it's very hard to prove unless maybe you have texts where someone is telling you some, It's such a hard thing to prove, not just in this jurisdiction, but in other jurisdictions as well. And yes, our people have not yet gotten to accept that beating your woman is something wrong. How about telling your woman off? So we'll get there. I do have hope that we'll get there.
You have a lot of hope, Esther.
Well, someone has to be optimistic.
The hope also is that as we deal with cases of physical violence, the emotional violence comes in. And so it starts to get recognized alongside the physical violence. So once you have already set the stage and it's known, people get to know that also this is how emotional violence manifests, and it's actually different from physical, then you can start to have a more legit conversation about just emotional violence. But where we are now, it's hard unless someone has had a psychic breakdown and has gone to a mental institute, and then you have evidence of things that their partner was doing to get them to that state, it might be very hard to prove.
Yeah. Right. Well, closing down, I'd like just very quickly a remark from each of you, something we can take home from this conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, first of all, thank you again for hosting us on the show. And my closing remarks are really to encourage the public to engage the justice system. There is, once the machine is not oiled, it will not work, and it's oiled with a number of cases going into the justice system. So let's engage it, but also to encourage everyone out there, whenever there is an abuse that is happening, to always refer people there, because it's only once we actively respond to this violence against women and children that it will start coming down.
I've always wondered, because one time a friend of mine was visiting Uganda and she could see her neighbor battering his wife, but she didn't know who to call.
Yeah.
She called, I think, okay, I don't know who she called, but she called somebody and they told her, no, that's not our sector. So who do women, or if it's a man being beaten, who do they call? Your local, the nearest police station?
Yes, one of the things that we encourage people to also do is to have the numbers, the phone contacts of the police, the people that are in charge of police in their regions. It's not only safe for you when you're facing domestic violence, but even for other crimes that occur. So once you have that number, at least you have a stepping stone for a response.
They weren't from here, so they tried to call 911.
Anyways, but yes, and flee as a victim,
also,
like, the responses. Flee. Personally, I think fleeing is better than fighting, especially if you're not as powerful as the perpetrator. Just flee and run for help, scream your lungs out.
It's probably faster than you, but okay.
Do as much as you can. You're really trying to defend first, but really try as much as you can. Flee, scream, scratch, do everything to avoid being a victim of violence. And that's true. And my last remark would be just a plea to Ugandans in general, especially when it comes to issues of intimate partner violence. It's been normalized so much that all of us just laugh at it or talk about it in such a flippant way, but it is an issue. It's becoming more and more of an issue. So report these cases. Do not let your children see you going through this. Do not let, as a man, do not let your children see you beating even as a woman, do not let your children see you beating your husband. As Alice said, it's very cyclical. So this is an issue. Let's address it. Let's stop laughing about it, and let's actually do something about it. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for taking the time to speak with us and sharing these insights and the stories that make us actually really think about our society and the contribution we can each make to do better. Well, that brings us to the end of our show for tonight. Thank you for watching. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition.